now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. Some of my viewers wanted me to do a review of Static Season 1, Number 2. Now, I am not a fan of this new Milestone Returns Static. As I see it, this series is absolute garbage compared to the 1993 classic series by Dwayne McDuffie and the 2000 animated series Static Shock. Both of those versions of Static are millions times better than this hot garbage, but my viewers wanted to see a review of this absolutely horrifically bad comic. Now, the first issue of Static Season 1, Number 1, left on a cliffhanger with Hot Streak setting Static's house on fire. And as this issue starts off on the cover, we get an image of that and Virgil in costume, ready to face off against Hot Streak, but he never puts on his costume in any of this entire issue. Now, the first page takes us, instead of into that intense fight, it takes us and shows us Daisy Watkins on the top floor of the projects. And she's supposed to be having some issues as related to the Big Bang, and it seems like they're setting her up to become a female Static. So it's looking like to me, after you've effeminized and emasculated Static in the first issue of Static and Milestone Returns and Milestone Returns 0, it looks like you're starting to head down the woke road and you're looking to now make a female Static, which will eventually replace the original Static. That's where I see this going with these identity politics, and this is what I'm seeing going on with the character as related to what's setting up. Now, after they do that little interlude, they then take us to the Virgil's house burning, and everybody being terrified about Virgil and Hot Streak facing off. Now, everything looks like it's about to get really intense, and we're going to see some more of a battle, but all of a sudden, we get Hot Streak's powers shorting out Ex Machina style due to Vita Ayala's really bad writing. And that really, again, shows how bad a writer she is, and it looks like she's trying to write this for television, but not really understanding how the mechanics of things work. So she's gotten your Hot Streak running out of juice, Ex Machina style, and then your Hot Streak then saying, "Oh, do you want to try to save your house?" And that keeps us from having the battle where your Hot Streak is taken down. And instead of Virgil facing off against Hot Streak and showing off his powers, that way we get him going out here and using ozone gas to put out the fire as related to his home in a double-page spread. And in this double-page spread, after Virgil puts out the fire, the whole family is rushed back into the home, and we're told the most ridiculous thing as related to a fire. Oh, the only thing that happened was that the paint peeled off the walls and that a lot of the windows were broken, but nothing else was damaged. So you have a fire inside of a home that's burning out of control, and all of a sudden, the only thing that happened was the paint was peeled and the windows were broken. And again, that's a plot device just meant to go out here and move the story forward. It's really lazy writing, and it just shows how Vita Ayala really is an extremely terrible writer. To just come up here, you give us this cliffhanger where we're terrified about Virgil losing his home, and then all of a sudden there's no real consequence to it. Just absolutely terrible writing. And then we have the father talking to Virgil and asking, "You don't know about your powers," and the whole thing is that it just makes no real sense. And then we get a page out of the Brian Michael Bendis book between the mother and the father arguing. And if you got this much dialogue in a single series, you need to break it in a couple of panels so that the reader can follow the dialogue, not do it like this, because this is very jumbled and very hard to follow. So when I looked at that page with the parents arguing, it was another poorly done page and a poorly done comic, and I'm really getting tired of the whole thing with the Virgil character in this version. He's just so emotional and so feminine, acting every brooding and in his feelings, and that's not the way Virgil was in the classic 93 or the Static Shock series. In fact, what he was doing was going out here and learning how to use his abilities and practice how to use his powers. Instead, we get this effeminized, emotional Virgil who's sitting here brooding and in his feelings, and this just does not fit the happy-go-lucky Virgil character I knew in the comics. It does not fit who he is, and it feels like a completely different character. Again, he feels more feminine because he's just so emotional, and he just does not feel like the Static I knew and grew up with. And as the story goes on, we get Virgil after the fire going back to school, and he runs into Darius, who wants to talk about the conspiracy theories as related to the Big Bang. And instead of Virgil trying to keep things a secret, what he does is he uses his powers in public and takes this comic from the classic Static tropes of Virgil wanting to have a secret identity to protect his family, to going out here and heading towards the road of becoming a CW show. Because that's what this feels like. You're trying to make the CW version of Static, and you're not trying to stay faithful to everything Dwayne McDuffie established. And this whole feud between Darius and Virgil really shows how this is becoming more about them trying to turn this comic into a possible TV show, because your Reginald Hudlin is obsessed with trying to take the Milestone characters Hollywood, and this comic is another indicator of that they want to take this character and turn him Hollywood. And again, this brooding Virgil who cuts school, completely out of character for Virgil, who would be sitting there making plans for role-playing games and hanging out with his friends. But this Virgil is always sitting here brooding and angry and talking about buzzing and again, in his feelings. And as he's cut school, he then takes a minute to call Curtis Metcalf, who was a part of a program he was a part of. And he calls Curtis Metcalf and asks for help. And he tells him he has a storage locker, Ex Machina. Again, taking us from looking like you want to make hardware into the MCU version of Spider-Man, and where he's going to go to his rich friend Curtis Metcalf, aka Tony Stark, and you're going to go out here and try to make it where he can go out here and use the stuff he gives him in the lab. And that's one of the things they're trying to do on that page. Now, there also is a thing with Darius talking about how they're looking to make the Blood Syndicate, and I really do not like the way they're making the Blood Syndicate. It is completely out of context, and it really does not really come together again in an organic fashion. Now, Virgil, after talking to Curtis Metcalf, Tony Stark Ex Machina, goes to the Dakota storage, where he finds a whole bunch of stuff that is supposed to help him, and this is the stuff that's supposed to help him make his costume. And I really don't like this whole thing, because I liked everything in Static Shock and the original Static about him making his own stuff and coming up with his own things. But they want to come out here and make Curtis Metcalf the MCU version of Tony Stark, and it's just not really coming together and staying true to the spirit of the characters. And the Static Season 2 ends with no character in costume, no character in action. It's basically an expository issue meant to move the story along, and it just shows how Vita Ayala really does not have a good handle on this character. She does not have a good handle on his story, and she does not have a good handle on getting Virgil Hawkins, because Virgil is nothing like this brooding, angry kid that they're presenting in this book. I mean, I don't know who this is, but Virgil Hawkins was, even in the face of dealing with bullies like Hotstreak, was a bit more happy-go-lucky and a bit more fun-loving. And he was always about his hobbies like comics and role-playing games and video games and superhero movies. And this just does not fit who he is. And that is what makes this whole relaunch of Static a major disappointment, because like Icon and Rocket, it does not feel like the characters have come back. No, it feels more like an alternate universe with somebody else's interpretation of the characters and not the characters themselves. And that's one of the things I'm deeply disappointed about this version of Static, this what I call CW Static, because it feels more like one of those cheesy CW TV shows, and it does not feel like a Static TV show where we would get to see the character going out here being his usual happy-go-lucky, fun-loving self. So I'm deeply disappointed by this issue of Static. And again, I cannot recommend this series because it is that lame, and it just is not up to the high standards that your Dwayne McDuffie came up with over 30 years ago. I mean, when I think about Static and I think about how great that character is, I don't see any of that greatness here. And I don't see any of that greatness here because Vita Ayala just is not a great writer. She gets lots of titles. She gets lots of stories. Unfortunately, she does not take the time to do the research to get the characters. And because she does not take the time to do the research to get the characters, we get characters that basically are just her making her own voice on the character. And that takes us out of the character because this Static feels more emotional and not logical and critical thinking like the original Virgil Hawkins was. And it feels more like a female trying to tell us what a male is like, and she does not have a good understanding of how men go about solving problems or how boys go about solving problems in their lives. And that all comes across in this absolutely dreadful second issue. And we've only got 4 more issues of this season 1. But if this were a TV series, I would have canceled it because the story just isn't there. And the whole series is absolutely disappointing and absolutely dreadful. Now, I'm trying to raise funds to get my second comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, together. So if you want to help me get the new John Haynes comic to print, you can donate to the Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to check out my first comic, Esteem No Good Deed, it's available on Amazon.com in Kindle format for 99 cents. So I would really hope that you guys give my first comic a try to see how I would do a comic. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available on Kindle, Esteem No Good Deed. The Devil's Divas, here's some stick-up kids straight in this action-packed Esteem series comic. Get Esteem No Good Deed on Kindle for 99 cents today.